Hi class, in this video we are starting chapter 9, which is developmental psychology, and let's get started. When we are talking about this chapter, there are a few areas that we're going to talk about. We are going to talk about physical development, so growth and changes in the body and the brain, the senses, motor skills, health and wellness. We'll talk about cognitive development, which is learning, attention, memory, language, thinking, reasoning, creativity. We will do psychosocial development as well, which is emotions, personality, and social relationships. And for this chapter, most of the time we're going to be taking the normative approach, which asks, what is normal development? So the different stages, the different milestones we're going to talk about focused on this normative approach, what they do is they do large studies with thousands of kids in them at various ages to determine what these norms are, when most kids reach specific developmental milestones in those three domains: physical, cognitive, and psychosocial. And so examples of milestones that you might see are things like the age that you crawl, the age by which you walk, the age by which you say your first word, the age that you can put two words together, the age that you can dress yourself, say your colors, the age where you can take someone else's perspective, the age you tend to compare yourself to other people when you are thinking about your identity, the age you start puberty, lots of different milestones. One thing to remember though is that not all normative events are universal. Not all milestones are universal. Biological milestones tend to be universal. The age at which you say your first word, the age at which you start to walk. But social milestones are more culturally specific. So for example, the age you get married, the age you move out of your parents' home, the age you have a kid, those sorts of things, the age you start drinking alcohol. Those are social milestones. Those are going to vary. One big debate that we have in developmental psychology is whether development is continuous or discontinuous. If it is continuous, it means that it's a cumulative process. There's a gradual change, improvement on existing skills. So it's hard to see the change because it's gradual. Whereas in discontinuous development, development takes place in unique stages. So you're at one level of development and then you have a quick improvement to the next level of development. And so if it is discontinuous, then the idea is that you are going to see this development at specific times or ages. It's definitely going to be a more sudden change. And so there are, when we go through the different theories like Piaget, Kohlberg, we'll talk about this continuous, discontinuous idea, how people tend to fall into one category or another. Another huge debate we see is the nature-nurture debate. So if something is on the nature side, it means it's caused by biology or a genetic basis. Whereas if it's nurture, it's your environment or your culture. And this, for the nurture, for the environment part, it can even be prenatal environment, but it's your exposure to something in your environment, whatever that environment is, that causes you to be this certain way. And honestly, oftentimes, for most things, it's not nature or nurture, it's nature and nurture. So there's a little bit of one and a little bit of another that go into whatever this thing is. For example, the age that you take your first steps. Partly it's nature. If your parents were late walkers, you're going to be a late walker. But a part of it is your environment. So if you get held a lot, that's an environmental difference. You're not going to walk as early because why do you need to walk? Someone's holding you. So nature and nurture for the most part, usually not just one or the other. So one way to look about, or one example of this nature-nurture debate is the achievement gap. The achievement gap is the persistent difference in grades, test scores, and graduation rates that exist among students of different ethnicities, races, and sometimes sexes. Now, there are, if you think about like chapter 7 with intelligence, people like Arthur Jensen would say it's a nature thing. There's genetic differences that cause difference in things like intelligence scores, which would lead to differences in test grades. But this is one where this is more nurture. And it's not like it's, if you have good parents, you're going to do well. And if you have bad parents, you're going to do horribly. It's not that. A big factor with the achievement gap is socioeconomic status. And so kids who come from low-income backgrounds tend to do significantly worse than middle-income or high-income kids on things like standardized tests, things like graduation rates. The best predictor of your SAT score is your parents' income. The richer your parents are, the better your SAT score. And so you see this correlation between your economic status and this achievement gap. How likely you are to graduate, how likely you are to, be in the top 10% of your class, things like that. But it's not just your economic status in high school. It starts even younger than that. For example, middle and high income parents tend to interact differently with their kids than low income parents. One way you see this is in how much you talk to your children. So middle and high income parents tend to talk more with their children as compared to low income parents. For example, by the age of 3, high income kids knew twice as many words as low income kids. This is not because low income parents don't care about their children. A part of it is practical. They're working more hours because they're in a lower paying job and they need to provide for their kids. And so they're not around their children as much because they're working, and they're more exhausted when they are home with their kids and less likely to engage in a conversation. So kids who are lower income are just exposed to less vocabulary, and then that can affect how much vocabulary they know, which has more long-term effects on things like achievement tests. Because even by kindergarten, you are seeing this achievement gap. Before entering kindergarten, high-income kids tended to score 60% higher on achievement tests, the entrance test that they give to kindergartners to see sort of where they are, compared to their low-income counterparts. And a part of that is how much the parents spoke to them. A part of it is the level of preschool that the kids could get into. A part of it is the enrichment activities that the parents could afford. There's lots of factors, but even as young as kindergarten, you are seeing this achievement gap. That is definitely going to be more of a nurture rather than a nature thing. Okay, so what we are going to do now, we're going to start looking at theories of development. And for this whole chapter, we are talking about lifespan development. What lifespan development means is that we are looking at the entire lifespan, conception to death. Sort of the original developmental theorists tended to focus just on childhood, but now the field is much broader. We don't just look at kids, we look prenatally, and then we also look into adulthood and changes that occur then. So we're going to go through several theorists. We'll talk about Freud, Erikson, Piaget, Kohlberg, We're going to talk about a few different psychologists and the way they think about development. So Freud is the first one. In this chapter, we are not going into a lot of specifics about Freud. We're going to save that for the personality chapter. I'm going to talk a little bit more about Erikson in this chapter, and then Freud's theory in the personality chapter. But you do need to know just a hint about Freud. Freud thought that personality developed in early childhood, specifically as you worked your way through the psychosexual stages. There were 5 psychosexual stages. And so you were in stages, it was based on ages. So question for you, if he has these stages that you are in that are based on your ages, is he a continuous or a discontinuous theorist? He is a discontinuous theorist. You are in this stage, then you jump to the next stage. They are distinct, discrete levels you are in. So you have periods of no development, and then you're going to that next stage. So Freud is going to be a discontinuity theorist. And he thought that if you didn't have proper nurturing from your parents during a certain psychosexual stage, you would become stuck in that stage. You would show signs of that stage even when you were old enough that you should have been out of it. We call that being fixated. And so for his psychosexual stages, for all of them, you have an erogenous zone. An erogenous zone is where you derive pleasure in that stage. For example, again, we will go into much more detail about these stages in the personality chapter. But for erogenous zones, the first psychosexual stage is the oral stage. The erogenous zone is the mouth. So that's the first year of life, and kids are always sticking things in their mouth. They are getting pleasure from their mouth. And so if you don't properly get through that stage, if your mother weans you too early or weans you too late, you will have an oral fixation. You will show signs of that stage later on. You'll smoke. You will talk too much. You'll overeat. You'll bite your nails. You are using your mouth more than the average person because you're showing signs of that stage in adulthood. So that is Freud's idea. Who you are develops as you go through these stages, what your personality is, how you're going to act, how you're going to think. But it's really early childhood and these psychosexual stages that determine who you are. A lot of modern psychologists are not fans of Freud and his psychosexual stages. There are not a whole lot of people that think this is legit. But the idea that your childhood can affect you as an adult is something that has stuck around. A lot of people do believe in that. The next person we'll talk about is Erik Erikson. And his name is spelled like this. Erik Erikson was one of Freud's students. And so he modified Freud's ideas. He modified that idea of psychosexual stages, and he created psychosocial development, which emphasizes the social nature of our development rather than the sexual nature. So it's your interactions with people that affect who you are. Another big change between Erikson and Freud was that this was a lifelong theory. So Freud really focused on childhood. Erikson focused on the entire lifespan. And he really focused on how our interactions with others affect our ego development. So your sense of self, how you view yourself. You're motivated by the need to achieve competence in certain areas depending on your age. So Erikson, also discontinuity theorist. You're in the stage, then you're in that stage. They are distinct, discrete from each other. There are 8 stages, and there is some sort of conflict thing you need to get through in each stage in order to successfully get through it and have a healthy sense of ego. So I will briefly, and if you don't get through it, then you're going to feel inadequate. So I'll briefly go through his 8 stages, because then in the personality chapter, we won't go in depth on these. This is the chapter where you should be able to recognize his 8 stages. The first stage, which is the first year of life, 0 to 12 months, is the trust versus mistrust stage. And the trust versus mistrust is, it's really focused on your relationship with your caregiver. And if your caregiver is responsive to your needs, comes when you cry, feeds you when you're hungry, that sort of thing, it's going to help you develop a sense of trust. The world is safe and predictable. When you need something, you'll be helped. If your caregiver ignores you, isn't meeting all your needs, then you're going to develop anxiety, fear, mistrust. You're going to see the world as unpredictable. The second stage, which is ages 1 to 3, is the autonomy versus shame and doubt stage. So this is when you're a toddler, and toddlers are learning to control their actions, to act on their environment, to get results. This is where they're really going to focus on independence. Let me do it. I don't need your help, sort of a thing. And if a toddler doesn't have opportunities to do that, then they will doubt their ability. They'll have low self-esteem and they'll feel shame, like they're unable to do things. The next stage is initiative versus guilt. This is the preschool year, so this is going to be like 3 to 6 years of age. And in this stage, you're learning to plan and achieve goals while interacting with others. You are going to want to develop self-confidence, a sense of purpose. If your attempts to take initiative sort of misfire, or if you're not allowed to take initiative, then you're going to develop feelings of guilt. The next stage is elementary school. So that is going to be like 6 to 12. And that is the industry versus inferiority stage. This is when kids first start to compare themselves to their classmates, to their friends, and see how they measure up. And so they're either going to feel a sense of pride and accomplishment because they are doing well compared to others, or they're going to feel inferior and inadequate. The next stage is identity versus role confusion, and this is going to be from 12 to 18, so this is adolescence. And this is when you're really trying to create your own sense of self. A lot of adolescents try on a lot of different senses of self. They, 1 month they dress in this style, another month they dress in that style. They're always changing what kind of music they like and what their interests are as they try to figure out who they are, what their beliefs are. If they are successful as they go through this stage, they're going to have a strong sense of identity, and they're going to be able to remain true to their beliefs and values, even if they're questioned, even if things are hard. If they are not successful in this, then they're going to develop apathy. They're not actually trying to figure out who they are. Maybe they're pressured to conform to what their parents' beliefs are, and they're not allowed to see or to decide if they think differently than their parents, what their parents' beliefs, what their parents do. That's what they need to believe and do as well. Then they're going to have a really weak sense of self and experience role confusion about their identity, about their future, all that fun stuff. And then you have the next stage, which is intimacy versus isolation. This is going to be in your 20s, 30s, and 40s. And so this stage is when you need a strong sense of self in order to develop close relationships with other people. This is when really important relationships in your life happen. This is when you're going to find a partner. This is when you might decide to have children. If you don't develop a positive self-concept in adolescence, it might lead to feelings of loneliness and emotional isolation. So do you develop close, intimate relationships, or do you stay isolated? The next stage is 40s to 60s, and this is going to be the generativity versus stagnation stage. This is that middle adulthood time where the big focus tends to be on your career. And so generativity is when you sort of find your life work. You contribute, you make a difference in society. Or you can have stagnation. You don't feel a lot of connection with other people. You don't feel very productive. You don't feel like you're improving yourself. Those are the two ways it can go. And then finally, the last stage is going to be integrity versus despair. And so this will be 60s until you die. And this is late adulthood, basically. This is the idea that you're looking back on your life. This is when you're starting to retire. You're not going to be in the workforce anymore. And you either are going to feel a sense of satisfaction, like people are going to miss you when you're gone, you've lived a good life, or despair, no one's going to care, you're a failure. So these are Erikson's stages. Yep. And so again, it's these conflicts you go through. It's the whole lifespan, but it's definitely discontinuous. And then the next thing, final thing for this video we're going to talk about is Piaget. Actually, move this up here. There we go. And that's how you say his name, Piaget. Jean Piaget. He was French. He did cognitive development. And so there's two ways we are going to talk about this. First way, thinking about schemata with assimilation and accommodation, and then we'll do his his cognitive stages. So the first way he thought about cognitive development was thinking about schemas that you create, the schemata. These are concepts that are used to help us categorize and interpret information. You create these concepts using assimilation and accommodation. Assimilation is when you take in information that's comparable to what you already know. So you interpret a new situation using and applying your existing schemata. If you do accommodation, you are changing your schemata based on the new information. You adapt the schemata, modify them, or create new schemata. So I'll give you an example. And again, you start this young, in infancy, and honestly, you do it throughout your whole lifespan, but most cognitive development does happen in childhood. That's where Piaget focused his life. So an example, I'll use my son as an example. When my son was little, a couple of years old, we had a dog. And so he had a schema in his head for dog. 4 legs, furry, tail. And then we went and visited my aunt, who also had a cat. And the first time he saw the cat, he looked at it and said, doggy, because it was this creature with 4 legs, it was furry, and it had a tail. That is assimilation. I'm experiencing this new thing, this new creature. Let me apply my existing schemata to this novel thing. And although that was cute when he was 2, he can't keep doing that. So we taught him, no, this is different. This is a cat. And so then he had to switch to accommodation. He had to modify his schemata. Dogs have 4 legs, they're furry, they have a tail, and they bark. Cats have 4 legs, a tail, they're furry, and they meow. That's going to be accommodation. Let me modify my schema because of this new information. And so, question for you, what is another example of either assimilation or accommodation? Okay, so that is one way Piaget looks at life. The other way, and the last thing we'll go over in this video, is his cognitive stages. So Piaget, cognitive stages, you are in these stages based on your age, and you can take tests to show if you're in one stage or if you're in another stage. So question for you, does that make him a continuous or a discontinuous theorist? Okay, again, discontinuity. Definitely discontinuous. You make quick changes to the next stage. For Piaget and his discontinuous theory here, he says there's 4 stages. sensory motor, pre-operational, concrete operational, formal operational. The easiest way to know the differences is look at the title. So for example, sensory motor stage, it's all about senses and movements. And this is going to be in the first 2 years of life. So this is 0 to 2. And oh, 1 second, my dog got a marker here. No. For the sensory motor stage, if you think about little kids, it's all about learning to control their movements and using their senses. They're sticking everything in their mouths. What happens in the sensory motor stage is that you develop object permanence and you develop stranger anxiety. Object permanence is knowing that something exists even if you don't see it. Object permanence develops at about 5 to 8 months of age. And so before you have object permanence, if you don't see something, it doesn't exist. So if a 4-month-old is trying to, like, I don't know, slobber all over your phone and you don't want them to, just hide it behind your back. When they don't see the phone, it doesn't exist anymore. They're not going to try to reach behind your back for it because they can't realize it exists still. So once they have object permanence, if you hide something, they will lift up the blanket. They'll look behind your back. They'll try to find whatever you hid because they know it exists. But before object permanence, nope, out of sight, out of mind, literally. Stranger anxiety tends to develop at the same time as object permanence. Stranger anxiety is the fear of unfamiliar people. And so basically kids are unable to assimilate this stranger into their existing schemata. So they can't predict what the stranger is going to do because it's not someone they know. And so that makes them anxious. They're scared of strangers. So both of those things develop during the sensory motor stage. The next stage is the pre-operational stage. This is before you are operational, before you can do operations. Operations are mental activities. Doing activities mentally, it'll make sense. So kids who are pre-operational, and this is going to be 2 to 7 is the pre-operational range, they can use symbols, they can imagine things, but they cannot mentally manipulate information. And their logic tends to be based on their personal experience. They can't think hypothetically. In this stage, pre-operational kids lack conservation. You do not have conservation if you are pre-operational. And so conservation is knowing that you can change the appearance of something, but that its matter, its substance doesn't change. As long as you don't remove or add anything, its character doesn't change even if its appearance does. And so there are several types of conservation tasks that you can do. And so the first thing I'm going to do is show you a kid who is pre-operational. This is actually my nephew many years ago. It was 4 or 5. I think it was 5 when this video was made. So if he's 5, he's pre-operational, which means he does not have conservation. But you'll see this video of sort of one of the more typical conservation tasks right now. Are these glasses the same size or different sizes?
Same size.
Same size. Okay, so what I'm going to do, watch this. Is there the same amount of liquid or different amount of liquid in those glasses now?
Different.
Different? Which one has more?
This one.
This one has more? What about now? Same or different?
This one.
What one has more?
Both.
They're the same? Or are they different?
Same.
They're the same. Okay. Now, same amount in these. Watch this. I'm going to take every drop of this one, and I am going to pour it in here. Okay, now, which glass has more? Does this one have more? Does this one have more? Or are they the same?
This one has more.
This one has more? Why does this one have more?
Because it's bigger.
Because it's bigger than that one?
Uh-huh.
Okay, so this one has more. Now, I'm going to take all of this. Pour it back in there. Every last drop. Now.
Same size.
So they have the same amount now?
Yep.
Okay, great. Thank you. And how old are you?
5.
5. Okay, thank you, sir. So that is lacking conservation. You're going to fail a conservation task when you are pre-operational. Another big thing in this stage is that at the early part of this stage, like 2 to 4, you are egocentric. So early pre-operational kids have egocentrism. That's when you're unable to take the perspective of other people. And so what I'm going to do now is show you the 3 mountain task, which is a perspective taking task that you give to little kids. And so you'll see, based on the ages, the younger kid, the one who's pre-operational, his perspective, what he sees is what he thinks everybody sees. So watch that now.
Can you tell me what you see when you look at that from where you're sitting? What are some of the things that you see?
And a cat.
A cat.
And a tree. And a bone.
Okay, now we're going to do the same thing. Can you tell me what you see when you look at it from that stool?
An owl.
An owl?
And him.
What is that?
A goat.
A goat?
Yeah.
Okay, is there anything else you see?
Yeah, right there.
Right there, what is that?
A tree.
A tree.
And that's another little tree.
Another little tree?
Yeah, right.
Okay. And can you tell me what I see when I look at this from where I'm sitting right here?
An owl.
Okay.
And a goat.
Mm-hmm.
And a little tree. And that. And that.
Okay, so can you tell me what you see from that side?
A fox and a bone and a volcano and
Yeah?
a rock and a big fat Christmas tree.
Now, Braxton, can you tell me what I see from where I'm sitting?
A bird and a river and a volcano and a horsey and a rock and a tree.
Okay, so that is it for pre-operational. And actually, the next 2 stages are really fast, no videos. So we will cover those, and that'll be it for this video. Okay, so next is concrete operational. You know you are concrete operational, which is like 7 to 12 years of age. Oh, you two, don't play with each other right now. Hey, shh. 7 to 12, and in this stage, you will, oh, hold on, I'm going to kick my dogs out of the room. Okay, so concrete operational, actually concrete operational is 7 to 11. 12, you're starting to get into formal operational. You have conservation, you can pass a conservation task. What sort of the ability you have when you're in this stage that lets you pass conservation tasks is reversibility. Reversibility means that you know that objects can be changed and then returned back to their original form or condition. For example, when you are doing a conservation task and you're thinking, does this water have more than that glass of water? And now it looks different. In your mind, you're pouring it back into the original glass and knowing it's going to look the same still. You are reversing the action in your mind. You have reversibility. So kids who are concrete operational have reversibility. And then finally, 12 through the rest of your life is formal operational. And this is when you are able to think hypothetically. You're able to do what they call hypothetical deductive reasoning. You're able to do if-then statements. You're able to think, hypothesize, what ifs, that sort of thing. In the formal operational stage, you also have renewed egocentrism. Sometimes it's called adolescent egocentrism. It's different though. So this new egocentrism, basically, you think other people care about you more than they actually do. So, a teenager who has a zit on their nose, they're going to be like, oh my goodness, I know everyone noticed my zit. No one cares about your zit. But you think everyone cares about it because you care about it. So you're a little more egocentric again. So that is formal operational. And then a fifth stage that's been proposed is post-formal. Post-formal is when decisions are based on situations and circumstances. So you do situational thinking. Basically, context matters. What's okay in one situation might not be okay in another. It depends on the context. And so there is some debate on whether there is that fifth stage. But that is Piaget and his stages, and that is where I will end this video.